Okay, wrestling fans, we are back with another edition of PennLive's Wrestling Podcast, which primarily deals with Penn State wrestling, but also focuses on the state of Pennsylvania wrestling. There's a lot of just great wrestlers in the state of Pennsylvania, a lot of great programs, but it's hard to focus on what Penn State's been doing the last few years, and especially this year. And we have a special guest here on this April 2nd taping of the PennLive Wrestling Podcast. I'm Bob Flounders and with Jim Carlson, but Shane Sparks, the one of the great ambassadors, I think, of wrestling, college wrestling, the go-to voice of the Big Ten Network. I mean, Shane, thank you first of all for coming on. But you've had a front row seat not only to Penn State's wrestling success, but Big Ten wrestling success. What happened at the tournament? It has to have been a crazy last few months for you, but also probably you're not as busy as you were then. So what are you doing to fill that void, that wrestling void? Because I think it's such a big part of your life.
Yeah, guys, good to see you guys. Always appreciate coming on and talking some Big Ten wrestling, college wrestling. It was very busy. This was a really fun season for me. Watched a lot of wrestling in the Big Ten and outside the Big Ten as well, with some different opportunities. But I'm ready to roll again. I mean, it's 1 week after the season, you just kind of take a deep breath and you relax. But quite frankly, I plan on really ramping things up. I want to do a better job this upcoming season with some storytelling. So for that to happen, I'm gonna have to reach out and do a lot more research this off season. So really, it will not stop, believe it or not, because just like in the sport, when you're wrestling. It's the message at Penn State, which I really, really agree with, and it's resonated with me personally. The great ones, Penn State or great wrestlers, anybody that wants to be great at what they do, you want to keep getting better. You got to keep getting better. You can't stand still. So I think this offseason will be the busiest offseason I've ever had.
Well, Shane, you've been around a while. Obviously, you've seen countless matches, talked to all sorts of wrestlers and coaches. What is it that stands out to you about Cael Sanderson's ability to not only build a team, but more importantly, prepare his individuals for what has turned into long-term success for most of them?
I mean, I just have I'm like everybody else. I mean, I'm on the outside looking in. I mean, I have a really good relationship with Cael. I don't claim to be best friends with them, so I don't know what the quote-unquote secret sauce is at Penn State. But results speak for themselves. And again, on the outside looking in, when you listen to those guys talk, and it's well documented, but I think it's so much easier said than done, is to truly embrace getting better at wrestling. I mean, not focused on the results, getting better at wrestling, enjoying the opportunity, enjoying the journey, the process. I heard something recently with Cael where he made a comment about how, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, so don't quote me on this exactly, but it was something to the effect of, the way I interpreted it was, how disappointing would it be if the result was all you had? And that really, really stuck with me, because it's so true. It's not about the result. It's about the relationships. It's about testing yourself, getting better, being able to do this. I mean, you get to do this. I mean, I remind myself of that. I love broadcasting. Don't get me wrong. There are certain days I'm a little tired. You go on, 2, 3, 4 days where you get a little bit tired. And I like to start the day. You wake up, you go in the mirror, and you go, I get to do this. Are you kidding me? I mean, I still can't wrap my head around that I get to broadcast Big Ten wrestling or do the national tournament on Madcast. It blows my mind I get to do this. And that's how they think there. They want to get better. There are so many things that I hear from their athletes that really, it motivates me.
Well, I think we're all fortunate you get to do this, but so think about UCLA basketball in the 70s, clearly before your time. Connecticut women's basketball a decade or so ago, Iowa wrestling under Gable, all dynasties. Where does Penn State wrestling fit into that list?
I haven't done the big research on North Carolina soccer, I believe. I mean, you look at some of these great runs that you alluded to. I think again, I'm not an expert on these things, but on the surface, based on the depth, the parity, the skill sets, with college wrestling as it is today, what they've done at Penn State, 12 of 14. I believe I saw a stat that with their 2 national champs in Philly, that since 2011, I think they've had 40 individual national championships, and Cornell, I think, is second with 14. I mean, what they did this year, 8 guys in the top 3. 8 guys in the top 3.
Yeah.
Rain Davis takes 5th, and Kirkfleet, after the semis, defaults out to 6th place. In matches wrestled on the backside, 17-1. And that, to me, again, I'm just a fan like you guys, but that, to me, speaks to the gratitude, taking advantage of the opportunities. Some of these guys, I mean, they came for a national title. That's what they came for. So when that goal is taken away, it'd be real easy to feel sorry for yourself, to get down, and to not maybe bring a full effort back the next day or the next match. 17-1 on the backside. That to me is, I've run out of ways to describe this kind of excellence is what's happened. I don't even know what to say anymore.
We're talking with Shane Sparks here on the PennLive Wrestling Podcast. Shane, maybe you can speak to this. This is my first year. Normally I cover just Penn State football, but I wanted to just kind of get a real close look at Cael and the Penn State wrestling team. When did it dawn on you? At what point in his coaching career here, what did it kind of sink in with you that Cael, the competitor, Cael, the wrestler, Cael, the winner, it was all going to translate over to the Penn State wrestling program and what he was going to be able to do? And also, I just am struck, I just can't get over how unassuming and how humble of a man he is. You would think there would be some ego to somebody who's done what he's done as a coach, as a competitor, but it's not there. And it's never, you're never really going to see it. And I just think to do all that stuff and be as grounded as he is, that's a remarkable life balance.
Well, he's got great perspective. I mean, he's clearly has great perspective. Just another thing that I'm just really admire about not only him and his staff. Know how to answer that question. I'm not sure. I mean, I wouldn't have a moment where I thought, wow, this is going to be something truly incredible. Because I think one thing, too, that perhaps gets lost in this is how tough it is to win one. I mean, look at some of the great coaches around the country. Coaches like Brian Smith at Missouri, Pat Popolizio at North Carolina State, Coach Gray at Cornell. I mean, we can go on and on and on and on and on. How many coaches have 2? You know, Tom Ryan, they won it in 2015. That was they do a great job there in Columbus. But it's so hard to win one that I think sometimes it's a little, perhaps by some, underappreciated, you know, what they're doing. But they have it rolling now, and I don't see it stopping. I just don't see it stopping anytime soon.
Penn State hasn't lost many guys, like a lot of guys hopping around. You know, they've lost 9 to the portal this year. So in my opinion, just one of those is a high-level starter. If Facundo just went to Oklahoma State. So I think a lot of them are reading the writing on the wall in terms of a 30-man roster cap. You know, there could be more, but this also could be an aberration because of the cap. What, in your opinion, what makes a lot of these guys stick around when they could be wrestling elsewhere?
They want to be the best. It truly comes down, in my opinion, to what is your goal? Like, what do you want? And you can choose whatever path you feel is best for you. I will never judge anybody for the decisions they make. This day in NIL, is it about the money to some guy? Maybe it is, and that's okay. Like, I'm not going to sit here and I just don't get into that stuff. But if you want to be the best, if you really, really want to be the best, if that's one of your goals, you know, it'd be hard to debate the Penn State room isn't the place to be, or one of the key places to be. I think I think we can all agree on this. It's a proven plan. I mean, there's not a whole lot of not a whole lot of question marks there. Guys go there and they win. I mean, there's just no debating that. So if you truly want to be the best, that would definitely make Penn State a really good option to be considered. I think that's fair.
Did you ever think, though, that you would see schools literally go shopping and wrestlers jumping around from university to university, sort of like it's a scavenger hunt because of the NIL? What are the pros and cons of that and now revenue sharing, in your opinion?
Well, I think the biggest thing is this roster cap, because, and this is in many conversations I've had with Jim Gibbons, who obviously, coached a national championship team at Iowa State, won a national title. He knows, he's an encyclopedia of wrestling, tremendous knowledge. And he's made the comment to me several times about, those guys that are, 30 to 40 on your roster. Those guys aren't your quote unquote big hitters, but they are the guys that had a great experience within your program. They're very successful people in their own right. And they go on, many of them, and go on to do great things. And they're the ones that are contributing back to your program in big ways. That, to me, is the biggest. That's something that concerns me. The roster cap, that concerns me. As far as the NIL stuff and the transfer portal, I don't know enough about it to speak intelligently about it. My first thought would be, I don't like it. And maybe, if I had the magic wand, I would say, okay, you can transfer, but it's going to cost you a year of eligibility. I think if you did that, it would curb it somewhat, not entirely, but I don't love it. I don't love it. I think it's, probably leads to a bigger gap between the have and the have-nots. And the reality is that was a pretty big gap even 5 years ago. We've had, how many programs have won it in the last, 25 years? A few, right? A few programs. So you'd like to see maybe a little bit more parity. But at the same time, you take Penn State out of it, at least, with this last tournament, you take Penn State out of it, and you had, Nebraska had a great tournament, Oklahoma State had a great tournament, Iowa takes fourth, but those top 10, the parity was pretty good. The fight for, I think, 2 through 10, 2 through 11 was pretty good. So it is what it is. I kind of just try to focus on the positive with all this NIL stuff and the transfer portal. It is, it reminds me a little bit of hot stove league baseball. It's like a free agency period. So some of that stuff is exciting. Whether or not it's good for the sport, that's a whole nother topic, I guess.
We're talking with Shane Sparks of the Big Ten Network here on PennLive Wrestling Podcast. Bob Flounders with Jim Carlson. I just wanted to get some of your thoughts. I know you have a lot of, just on what you saw at the national tournament as it relates to Penn State. Obviously what Carter did was phenomenal, and getting 10 All-Americans, something that Minnesota did in 2001, also phenomenal. I still can't get over what they did in the first couple of rounds, Shane, where they went 20 for 20, and I think they allowed one takedown total in all of those matches. And then the way that they wrestled back after some quarterfinal disappointments, that's what stood out to me. But what were the maybe some of the things that surprised you the most from the Penn State effort? And was there one or two storylines just from the national tournament that you were just kind of thrilled to see and maybe surprised to see?
Starting with Penn State, I would say this is what I said going into the tournament. And I think this is what I'm going to say right here is a little bit crazy. And anytime I would talk about this, I would tell people, you got to hear me out and let me finish the story. Because I would start out by telling people that if your life was on the line, and I asked you heading into that tournament, will Penn State get 10 national champions? Yes or no, your life is on the line. Of course, your answer is going to be no. But I will tell you this, you'd be a little nervous. That to me is crazy. Like, you'd be a little nervous.
Sleepless nights.
That to me is incredible. And based on what you just said, you'd be nervous Thursday night. When you went to bed Thursday night, yes, you'd be like, I don't think they're going to get 10 national champs. I don't think they will. But it's the fact that that's even being talked about in any capacity goes to tell you how good this program is. So, so many things like you just mentioned, they had such a remarkable tournaments. And they got to 2 champs, which is incredible. Maybe by Penn State standards, sometimes it's, we didn't get our 5 champs. Like, it's very hard to do. And then as far as the big storyline outside of Penn State at that tournament was Nebraska. And I was so happy for them. Mark Manning, I think, does a phenomenal job. I think he's one of the best guys I know in the sport. He loves his guys so much. And to see them come through the way they did with 8 All-Americans, 3 in the finals, 2 national champions, best program finish for Nebraska. They were a trophy team, I believe, in 08 and 09, pair of 4th-place finishes. I was super happy for Nebraska. You know, David Taylor obviously has added some juice to the college wrestling landscape down there in Stillwater. And Iowa takes 4th place, which is very hard to do. Maybe in Iowa, it is not as celebrated as what I think it should be. I know there's a standard there, but taking 4th place is hard to do and should be celebrated. So hats off to Iowa. Big Ten, 3 of the top 4 teams. I believe it was 37 All-Americans, 7 national champs, Gable Steveson not being one. Obviously, a really big storyline. I made the comment to Trent Heidley on Madcast on, I believe it was Friday. I said, with this national tournament, nobody is safe. Nobody is safe, including Gable Steveson. And I really believe that. These guys are all so good. Hey, was I surprised by it? Sure I was. Would I have picked Wyatt Hendrickson to win? Of course not. But at the same time, you know, we're talking about a U23 world champion, undefeated, the number 2 seed at the national tournament. He's pretty good. It's not like I beat Gable Steveson. The guy that beat him is pretty darn good, and he found a way to win. And I just appreciate that too. I'm a huge believer at this level that anybody can beat anybody. I just believe it. I'm just how I think.
Let's look ahead a little to next season at Penn State. You could make the argument that filling the 3 holes at 141, 84, and 285 with Marcus Blaze, Zach Ryder, and Cole Mirasola could be enough to keep the winning streak going, right? But now they've added Ono, the Japanese national champion, and Ohio State's Rocco Welsh, the 2024 runner-up to Starocci. Do you see one or both of those guys fitting in immediately?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, again, just looking at what they've done. I mean, these guys, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before and how difficult it is to win this day and age because of the parity, the talent level. Guys that show up as true freshmen and can win. I mean, that is so hard to do, but we're seeing it. Although this last year, Luke Lillidahl was the only true freshman to be an All-American. So it's still hard to do, but we've seen it more so now than we did, even a decade ago. So, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I don't see Penn State going anywhere, and it's that simple. Could Marcus Blaze come in next year and compete for a national title? Sure. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised in the least if he does that. So they will figure it out. Now with the transfer portal, you don't know what's coming. I mean, they might add somebody big today. Who knows? I mean, years back, you could forecast a little bit. Well, here's what the team is. Here's who they have. Now, I mean, it can be like, yeah, they got 3 holes, or, this is for any team for that matter. But like, oh, they got to fill these holes. Well, you can do that now with the transfer portal far easier than what you could before the transfer portal. So, yeah, Penn State, that freight train, in my opinion, not stopping anytime soon. And that is the most obvious comment you'll hear on this podcast.
Do you think, I guess it's probably obvious, and you talked about parity and all, but do you think there's anybody outside of the numbers 2, 3, and 4 who you mentioned as being the closest a contender to Penn State next season? What are you most looking forward to about next year's competition?
I've always said my favorite thing about this sport is opinions don't get you a single point on the scoreboard. And as good as Penn State is, and they will be a favorite, still got to go out and do it. I mean, you still got to go out and do it. And, the physicality of this sport is, I mean, look at the last couple of years with them. Starocci gets hurt late 2 seasons ago. Josh Barr gets hurt late this past season. Things can turn so fast. Obviously, Penn State able to deal with that easier than most programs just because of the depth of their team. They just have so much horsepower, but they got to go out and do it. And I will promise you this, that as big of a favorite as people might think they are, and they're not going to think like that. I think that's kind of what makes them great. Like they don't, you got to go out and do it. You cannot be comfortable. Somebody's coming for you. You are always under attack, and you got to train and live your lifestyle accordingly. So what'll happen next year? Don't know. Just don't know. You got to go out and get it done, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. There will always be some surprises, and it's just, again, I guess it takes me back to what I said earlier. As good as the Nittany Lions have been, and as good as we think they will be next year, you still have to go out and do it, and it's really, really hard. Even that program, they work incredibly hard, and they've got to keep their foot on the gas. I mean, there's going to be no relaxing there. There's just not going to be.
Moving along here on the PennLive Wrestling Podcast with Shane Sparks, Bob Flounders, Jim Carlson. We got to ask you, Shane, just a little bit. They had a great team, but what Carter did, the 5 NCAA championships, how he did it, what he did to win his 4th one, which might be the most incredible thing that he did along the way. When you think about him maybe 5 or 10 years from now, what do you think you're going to remember? What are 2 or 3 things that are going to, it's not just the talent with him, it's the mindset, it's the constant chip on his shoulder, it's me against the world, all of that stuff. It's not an act with him. He uses all of that to his advantage, I think, better than most wrestlers. And it's just incredible how he does it. What are you going to remember about him maybe 5 or 10 years from now and what he was able to do?
When I'm 85 years old, God willing, I'm still alive, maybe on the rocking chair on the front porch, and maybe I'll know my name on some days, maybe I won't. I can promise you this. I will never forget how competitive Carter Starocci is. I've said before, and again on social media, I made a comment on Big Ten today that he was the toughest guy that I've ever seen, and then that gets, I didn't say he was the best wrestler I've ever seen. He's not the best wrestler I've ever seen, and that's debatable. But for me, what is not debatable is from a competitive standpoint, he is the toughest guy I've ever seen. Just pure grit. I've made the comment before, Carter Starocci wakes up in the morning, pours himself a bowl of nails, sprinkles in some sand, and then pours in some gasoline. He is so tough. I remember the first time we ever broadcast him, it would have been, I think it was 2021, might have been Valentine's Day. It was a Sunday, and he was wrestling Logan Massa from Michigan. I never really heard of Carter Starocci. What I remember was calling that match, he's fighting out of tough position after tough position. And as I'm calling the match, I'm thinking to myself, he's not going to win. I'm thinking about, he's not going to beat Logan Massa. And he just keeps fighting out of these positions and gave himself a chance. And then I believe it was in the tiebreaker, put him on his back, and he won 7-1 or something like that. And I just remember, of all the matches I've ever called, and I've called hundreds of them, I don't remember too many specific matches. I remember that match very vividly, and his toughness. And as you said, that run he went on to beat a couple of national champions last year. He had to avenge that loss in the Big Tens against Kemmer in 2021, beating Mekhi Lewis in 2022. And he's just so tough. He's so tough. Beating Keckheisen twice this season, won an official at the NWCA All-Star Classic. But Carter Starocci, from a pure grit and competitive standpoint, he is and I'm okay saying, I don't like making too many bold statements. I'll be bold on this one. He's the toughest dude I've ever seen. And I'm looking forward to what lies ahead for him, but it was a pleasure to call his matches. I will never forget him.
And Massa was a brawler. I remember that.
Yes,
too.
he was.
Yeah. I know you voted for Carter for the Hodge. I did as well. In my opinion, though, I guess it's understandable why Wyatt won. Would you agree that his numbers, his showmanship, his performance in the finals all added up to the perfect storm for Wyatt?
He had a phenomenal season. This was one of those years with the Hodge Trophy. I voted for Carter. I just like being transparent. But the fact that Wyatt Hendrickson got it, that is fine. He had a deserving case for that award, no question about it. And what it did for college wrestling, just outside the lane a little bit. We had Gable Steveson, Wyatt Hendrickson on Pat McAfee. Saw Carter Starocci and thought I saw somebody else. They were on like Fox News, another big platform. The Hodge Trophy debate was great. I mean, just engaging for the wrestling community. So, yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong. In my opinion, you could not go wrong. When you look at Starocci's resume and when you look at Wyatt's resume, they both had phenomenal campaigns. I know it's not a career award, is not in the criteria for that Hodge Trophy, but I would say that kind of organically, the pressure and the chase for 5, I mean, that meant something to me. So both guys had great seasons, no question.
All right, we're wrapping it up here with Shane Sparks of the Big Ten Network. Shane, thanks so much for coming on. Before I let you go, this is the first time I've had a chance to talk to you, and I just wanted to ask you, what is your level of like caffeine intake, or what do you have about as high an energy level? And I feel like it's just your everyday life, but how is it? Were you like this kind of, how did you get to be, it seems like you're always on, and that's not easy to do. Do you have a secret for the audience? Because I think a lot of people would like to kind of have that kind of upbeat attitude throughout their everyday life.
Yeah, I will tell you this, guys, I'm not on all the time. I'm kind of on when I have to be, but I think for me, it's all about passion. I love what I do. I've wanted to be a sports broadcaster since I was 8 years old. That's it. I never had a plan B. I'd have no idea what I would be doing if I couldn't do this. I love what I do, and it's not lost on me how fortunate I am. I mean, I'm someday, when I sit down with Jesus, I'm going to ask him, like, why were you so good to me? Because I know I failed him daily. So it's just not lost on me how I get to live my life. I get to do what I mean, I'm talking wrestling with you guys today. Like how crazy is that? I'm passionate. I love what I get to do, and grateful. I mean, it's not lost on me that I get to do this. So that's what it is for me.
Well, thanks so much for joining us here on the PennLive Wrestling Podcast. Jimmy and I really appreciate it. We look forward maybe to having you on again and seeing what is in store for Cael Sanderson's Penn State program next season. I think we all have a pretty good idea how it might play out, but it's just really fun to watch this up close unfold and the way that they do it.
Well, one thing too that the conversation is going to start coming up, and again, it's so hard to win one. So saying this is almost like I should be slapped because I'm in a way downplaying this, because again, it's so hard to get one. But now they're going for 5. 10's never been done before. And again, I'm putting the cart way before the horse. But I mean, they have been doing and will continue to do some things that could be pretty historic in the history of college wrestling. But always great to come out with you guys and talk some wrestling. And thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. See you next season.